Okay, everyone, welcome back. I'd like to introduce Kanzan John Slattery. He will be talking on women ancestors in the Soto tradition. So thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here, and thank you for having me and take this time to do a very, very general history on our Soto tradition as exemplified by its women practitioners, who I've been very inspired by. So just a real quick introduction on myself before we begin, because some of us may be meeting for the first time, and I'm really glad to meet all of you. I am a longtime Zen practitioner that started in Chicago with Zenku Smyers Sensei. And then we've kept our student-teacher relationship going for quite a while, a couple of decades. And then I did a priest ordination with him up in Montana in 2017, and then also a discipleship ceremony prior to that with both Zenku and Hojo-san, and that was in Chicago. So I have a long history with Hojo-san and Zenku-san, and did a second ordination for priesthood, novice priesthood in Oakland with Akiba Roshi. So that's where I'm based. I'm in Oakland, California, where I'm talking to you right now. And so just a little bit, that was just a little bit about me, my history, but I wanted to, this topic is inspiring to me because for many reasons, I had a lot of influence from my Dharma sisters and Dharma mothers that enabled me to be doing what I'm doing right now. I'll mention more by name as we go along. But what I'm doing today is just really a simple presentation on my own study based on the work of Dr. Paula Arai. She is a professor of Buddhist studies and a Buddhist practitioner, and she teaches currently at the Louisiana State University, and she has a pioneering work on the history of Soto monastics. So this is going to be kind of Japanese centric and monastic centric for a bit, but then it'll, as things go along, everything kind of radiates from there in terms of how our lay practice weaves together in that too. But the publication I'm talking about is called Women Living Zen, and maybe some have heard of that. And if you haven't, I highly recommend this. Women Living Zen. It was published by Oxford Press, and I just find it just such a rich resource, and that's why I'm just getting very enthusiastic on being able to share that with you, because I've found a lot of gaps that were in my own knowledge and way that were really coalescing in a nice fashion, in an informative way that had enhanced my practice. So I just wanted to share this this primary publication. I'll mention a couple others, but this is the primary source. So, and apologies in advance for trying to cover 1,500 years of history in 40 minutes or so, but this is a general overview. So, my aim, my hope is that this inspires your own research, inspires your own contemplation of our women ancestors and women peers and teachers in the present day. So I'll add personal notes along the way as well. So like I said, Dr. Arai is a professor of Buddhist studies at Louisiana State, and she received her doctorate, her PhD in Japanese Buddhism from Harvard University. So this publication called Women Living Zen is it's a historical exploration and an ethnographic study. So she had, Paula Arai had spent a better part of a year in training at the main Soto nunnery, you could say, the Soto training temple in Nagoya, Japan. And this was in the 90s. And it's called Aichi Senmon Nisodo. Senmon means training temple, or special training temple for priests. Sodo is another word for Zendo, but it's also a word that connotates the place that we sit zazen, we take our meals, and we sleep. So everything happens there in the Soto. And Ni, you may know that Ni is the honorific denoting female. So there's going to be a lot of names I'm mentioning with Ni. So it's just setting a context here. The Aichi Nisodo is still in very vibrant operation right now, and it's graduating a lot of priests, and some of whom I've met here in Oakland or in the Bay Area. Not only Japanese priests and teachers, but American and European. So they accept students worldwide. So I'm going to go back to the very dawn of Buddhism in Japan. And this is culled from Dr. Arai's work here. The two main sources of her historical account in this book come from chronicles, early chronicles of Japan. One is called Nihongi, and one is called Gangoji Garan Engi. And both of these are, you could call official histories of Japan, of the Japanese people. They include mythology and creation mythology too, but it's an extensive record. It's a chronicle of political and religious history in Japan, starting around the 6th century Common Era. So the Nihongi is the second oldest book in classical Japanese history of Japan. And it has proven to be a very important tool for historians, such as Dr. Arai and others, and archaeologists as well. And that was finished in 720. So we're going back a ways, but there's a reason why I'm going back that far. The other one called Gangoji Garan Engi is translated as Origins of the Gangoji Monastery and its Assets. So it's another chronicle, but it has a Buddhist, it's all about Buddhism. And that was completed in about 747. So both of these are primary resources for Buddhist historians. And that's why I mention these, because the first, one of the first ordained Buddhists in Japan, if not the first, is named Zenshin Ni. Notable, as I said, because of the Ni. She is considered the first Buddhist ordained clergy in Japan ever. Now, Paula Arai describes the context and the conditions of the time in Japan that were not only enabling a woman to be a spiritual practitioner and leader, but also it was an ideal circumstance for this too, because there weren't imperial edicts in place yet. I'll bring that up a little later. But we're talking about the year 584. And around this time, the Buddhist, the king of the, one of the kingdoms of Korea, called Paekche, gifted the emperor at the time with Buddhist statuary and sutras. So it started small, but it built from there. But there was, I would really like to find out more about how this gift from Korea came to the knowledge of this person who would become the nun named Zenshini. She might have had court connections, imperial court. I do not know this yet. So there's going to be more research. That's one of the things I found out in my study here is that this is a perpetual study alongside other histories. This is our history, and this is a big piece that can take perhaps a lifetime, if not more, to really understand. So it's really important for me personally, to take stock in this history. Not only a parallel history, but is history in our practice. It was kind of went on a parallel track when other political and cultural conditions happened. But what Paula is saying is that this was central and foundational to Japanese Buddhism. This ordained nun named Zenshini, and she is in. I don't know. I would like to ask who has seen the women's heritage diagram. It's not a lineage chart. It's more of a circular diagram. This, I hope you probably can't tell if it's reversed or not, but that's the diagram I speak of. And Zenshini is in there along with many others, but there are others that are Kanzan's. I'll get to Kanzan's disciples later, but there are some in there. But Zenshini was inspired, really had a calling to study Buddhism, and there were no barriers in her way other than geography, which was really wonderful for someone in the 6th century. So her and sister disciples named Zenzo Ni and Eizen Ni, all of them were eventually ordained in Japan, but they needed to further their study, so they went to Korea in that kingdom of Paekche to study under abbots there. And I have to find the monastery in that country. But that's the general history. That we do know that. So all three go there to study, and they return to back in Japan in the year 590. All of this, again, is in these historical records that I mentioned. It's recorded there. So we can imagine kind of the ripple effect of these pioneering Buddhist practitioners traveling to Korea, or what's now called Korea, and coming back to Japan to help establish a Buddhist practice. So I'm going to fast forward a couple of centuries now to the 8th century. And one of the largest figures in establishing Buddhism in Japan were the Empress Komyo and her spouse, the Emperor Shomu. Shomu is credited with establishing national temples, both for monks and nuns, and other edicts that proclaim some nationality to this new religion of Buddhism. And at this time, it's really still kind of it's not so much of the Zen school, but of the classical, what we call the Vinaya school, which is monastic discipline. And also, there's still a bifurcation of lay and monastic in a big way, and that continues for centuries. That's classical Asian Buddhism in a nutshell, monastic and lay. So, but this is the foundation for the establishment of Japanese Buddhism, this Vinaya school of monastic discipline. And also, there was some Mahayana influence in the form of the Lotus Sutra and other major sutras. But Empress Komyo was really pivotal in establishing Japanese Buddhism in what's called the Nara period. And she was behind the emperor's edicts establishing these temples for nuns and monks. And she also supervised the copying of sutras, including the Lotus Sutra. And some of these sutras are still residing in the great Nara temple called Todaiji. And I don't know who's been there. That's on my list of places to visit when I'm there. So I guess the witness is well known for its deep and magnificent presence in Japan. So after Empress Komyo, we start to see a change in the political and cultural values, and a more patriarchal system really starting to take hold and erode the roles of women in monasticism and in social life. So, which is very unfortunate. However, we have intrepid women practitioners all along the way. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about them today. But yes, there was in 646, there was an edict that proclaimed more of a Confucianism ideal, and that promoted more of a patriarchal society in gradual steps. It wasn't all at once, but it took hold. Some of it, there's definitely a residual effect there today, which is changing too. So we'll get to the present at some point. So again, this is a very, very broad timeline, but I do want to I just wanted to emphasize the establishment of Buddhism in Japan and how pivotal women were in that. And so now we're going to go on to Dogen, the main founder of our Soto school. And his relationship with women as vessels of the way and as Dharma practitioners, very wholehearted. It gets complicated later on, but there was a quote I'll share in Dogen wrote once, in the case of a nun who has received the treasury of the true Dharma eye through transmission, if monks pay homage to her and seek the Dharma from her, she should receive their obeisance. By what rights are only males noble? The empty sky is the empty sky. The four elements are the four elements. The five skandhas are the five skandhas. To be female is exactly the same. As for the attainment of the way, both male and female can attain the way. Hence, both should have high regard for the attainment of the Dharma and not argue about differences between male and female, such as the most marvelous law of the Buddha way. I'm quite convinced that his attitude here was influenced by his own mother, who was a very reverent practitioner as an imperial. She was an imperial consort. She was in the imperial court at the time. This would be Kamakura era, or period rather. And then, so she passed away. Some of us may know this already, that she passed away when Dogen was quite young. And then, and the story goes that upon seeing incense burning at her funeral and the smoke from funeral pyre, he really got a deep feeling for the impermanence of things, which really inspired him to seek the way. So undoubtedly his mother was, in life and in passing, was a huge influence on his own endeavors and practice of the way. Now, where it gets a little more complicated is when Dogen moves to the province on the west in Japan, in Echizen, which is now Fukui, where the monastery Eheji still stands. And he gets away from the political centers in Kyoto and Kamakura. He establishes a more celibate monasticism there. And I think, and for centuries, and still to this day, it's exclusively male. There have been lay practitioners who are women who have practiced there and still do practice there, but they're still on a level below the monks. And I would like to see how that changes. This is why we have respected monasteries like Aichi Senmon, but it's still not on a par. There's still not a parity there, but there are some positive developments. I don't want to get too far into the present now, but I just want to give a little context with AAG. So it does seem like Dogen gets a little more standoffish, you could say. He's more just really concentrating on his monks. I won't endeavor to try to speculate why, but he was really single-minded in establishing a monastic order, and that for him meant male only. So Dogen's fourth generation Dharma heir, considered to be the co-founder of Soto in Japan, Kanzan Zenji, that had much more broader and inclusive and consistent relationship with women, with female priests, students, and he had a very. There are stories of Kanzan and his mother's influence, very strong influence that were she really encouraged his own Buddhist seeking in his Buddhist practice. So it's a lot, and he's been quoted as saying that it's really in gratitude to his mother that he extends. I mean, that he not only accepts and but really embraces having the fact of having not only male students but female students as well. So Kanzan is in the 14th, straddling the 12th and 13th and 14th centuries, and but he's a very important figure in helping to promote women in our tradition. I wanted to bring out, so Paula in her book says that records indicate that Kanzan had around 30 nuns under his leadership, and many of their names are remembered, and many of them are in this women's heritage diagram. And I'm going to name these nuns: Sonin ni, Ekyu ni, Eni ni, Shozen ni, Yosho ni, Ginkai ni, Shinyo ni, Shinsho ni, Jonin ni, Yoshin ni. So that's a number of the 30. The records that Paula speaks of are the Soto official Soto Shu or Soto school records. So there are a number of them, and they overlap. Some have different focuses, but but she says Kanzan is the main figure responsible for increasing respect for nuns by actively implementing Dogen's teachings on male-female equality. And then William Bodiford, who is another author and scholar on medieval Soto history, says that there must have been many more nuns at medieval Soto monasteries than current records indicate. So just like my presentation is hitting highlights, and the true scope cannot be really known from this, even the records will not be able to indicate the true scope of the influence and practices and transmissions of the Dharma through the women's orders. Nonetheless, this is all, the more we practice and the more we investigate, it's evident the influence and this equality. I'm lucky that I've came up in the place and time that I have, where I can do this research, see the records, get it from very reputable sources who are not only scholars but practitioners. So I'm very grateful for that. So take a moment here to appreciate the rich history that came starting in, even I didn't even talk about pre-Japan. I'm just taking it up from Japan and then coming eventually to us here. So take a moment to appreciate that. Now, there is I can't recommend this book highly enough. I hope this inspires some of your own curiosity and research into this. But I don't know, it's backwards, but that's what it looks like. Let me see if I can, I'll change it later. I'll put this resource, I'll send it to Cosette so you can share it widely too. But there is a great lineage chart, starting with Dogen, that includes 4 nuns under his tutelage. It goes down to a Dharma heir, a third generation Dharma heir of his that includes four Soto nuns, and then we have Kanzan, who has many, and then it spreads from there. So I'd like to see. This is inspiring my own study of a really in-depth lineage that it's really moving to see even this small lineage tree that has monks and nuns, not just monks. So I'd really like to see more of that, and really I'd love to see in the future a major compilation of a lineage tree that's integrated this way. And I'm sure it will happen. I'm sure it may be worked on right now. So I'm going to fast forward again to more in the present time, in the recent era. I'm going to kind of skip over the reformations that happened in the late 1800s, early 1900s in Japan. I'll just kind of go right to a current and present and well loved and respected teacher in Japan named Shundo Oyama Roshi. And she's known here too, but she's not known as, she has some Western students. Most of her students are Japanese. And one of my friends here is a Dharma heir of Aoyama Roshi, and she's from Japan. She's a graduate of this Aichi Nisodo system in Nagoya. And she's my friend is also she works for she works with the International Outreach Group of Soto. So she lives here and works a lot with different activities, both in Japan and here. But she's a graduate of Aoyama Roshi's training in Japan. But I wanted to talk about Aoyama Roshi as an important figure. So I'm going to point to another paper called, and this is by Colleen Hartung, and this is a paper called Claiming Notability for Women Activists in Religion. And it's published by the American Theological Library Association, and it just came out last year. So, but this edition, this volume in this study is focuses on Aoyama Roshi. If you haven't heard of her, I think probably maybe her best known published work in translation is called Zen Seeds. And it's kind of like, I like it. It kind of feels like Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind to me. It's a very compact, pithy volume, and it's like almost like a pocketbook with a lot of teachings of very concise length. So I really like it. It's a very handy thing to have around. Zen Seeds by Shundo Oyama. So I recommend that too if you haven't seen it yet. So just a quick history on Oyama Roshi is that she graduated with a master's from Komazawa University, which is the Soto Zen University. And then she became abbess or head priest of Aichi Senmon. She started training novices there, and she became abbess of another Nisodo. So she's very important with transmitting the Dharma in a very official sense. She's it's a very important position. She's authorized. Was authorized since the 80s to train nuns, give Dharma transmission, and designate her own Dharma heirs. So she also serves, oversees a lot of Buddhist activities and does a lot of lectures. And as I mentioned, has authored Zen Seeds but many other books. So she's very well known in Japan and somewhat known here. But I'd be happy to help raise her profile. Everything I've read of hers and seen of hers online really speak to me. So I have a lot of respect for this teacher. So this author, Colleen, says, explains that in Oyama Roshi's case, she's very well situated in a notably patriarchal tradition, but she has been a leader in the struggle for gender parity in contemporary Japan. Due to her unflagging efforts, nuns in the Soto Zen tradition have now achieved unprecedented visibility and independence. And according, Apollo Rai also comments that the nuns now control their own religious training, enjoy educational and ceremonial rights, and have appropriate titles and religious robes. So today at this nuns training or priest trainings, the Nisodo, she also conducts regular classes and programs for lay people. So there's a lot of instruction in zazen, in formal meals, the oryoki, flower arrangement, tea ceremony. There's a lot. So there's a lot of traditional Japanese culture, but also as it's woven into Zen practice too. So in this paper, the comment is, as his lineage holder, she epitomizes 3 generations of 20th century female Zen practitioners who had valiantly embodied and thereby preserved the tradition. So, yeah, I just want to, a note of gratitude, personal gratitude for her efforts, her continuing efforts. I think I would guess that she's almost 90. She's in her late 80s right now. She's still very active. So, this has been a very broad scope. I realize that, and like I said, I just hope that this inspires your own investigation. There are a couple of points I also want to mention, areas, but I do want to do a time check. How we have until 3:30 Eastern. Is that correct? Okay, so we've got a little time, but I do want to open this up. The Hidden Lamp is a recent publication that includes a broad swath of practitioners, female, male, lay, and monastic. So that's another resource that I want to personally investigate in my own and keeping developing this kind of talk, but also, I'll encourage that as well. It's another history in a form of kind of koan. The other, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the influence in our sewing tradition too. My sewing teacher are the ones, and many of us have had Seiko Karen Wicken as a sewing teacher, or may eventually have as a sewing teacher, depending on your path. But when we sew the Raksu or the Okesa, we learn from our teacher Seiko Karen, and with assistance from Corolla Butler in Atlanta, and Seiko Sensei is a student. I'm going to go backwards here from Seiko, of Tomoe Katagiri, and Tomoe Katagiri Sensei was her spouse was Katagiri Roshi, who helped establish the Minnesota Zen Center and also assisted the San Francisco. So there's a parallel lineage of Katagiri in the modern day in America. So our sewing tradition is coming down from Tomoe Katagiri, who herself was a student of an important figure in a transmission of sewing. And my sewing teachers and sewing experts can correct me or fill in a lot of details, but I'm giving a general scope here too. So this modern teacher, she passed away in 1982. Her name was Yoshida Eishun, and she's an heir of the Hashimoto Roshi in Japan. And she was abbess of a temple in near Nagoya. And she taught robe, rakusu, and okesa sewing, and brought this craft to the United States in the early 70s. And she particularly transmitted these skills to not only Tomoe Katagiri, but also Zenke Blanche Hartman. So Blanche Hartman has been a very important point and teacher in the transmission of the sewing tradition here in the United States too. But I just give a general lineage there. But I wanted to add a personal note of gratitude as well, because help comes in many different shapes and forms and personalities. So I recognize that official teachers whose transmissions of teachings come down to me, but also every bodhisattva along the way, everyone, whether they're famous or not. To say that my Dharma sisters and seniors and mothers haven't been pivotal and integral in my practice would be an egregious error. It's a simple reality, in fact, that this is, I wouldn't be doing this with the help of all the women bodhisattvas out there. And there's a good friend of mine named Colleen Crivello. She helps run the Pittsburgh Zen Temple. And she helped me sew this, gave me some early tips for the rakusu, but Karen Wicken was the one who guided me every step of the way. But I got some really early tips from Colleen that showed up in that Karen was able to pick up on. So without Colleen, I probably would not have had a probably would have had a more difficult time sewing. And so, speaking of the robe sewing, I'm not wearing the Okeso right now, but I had the version of teaching lessons and sewing practice I did with Karen included, it was a correspondence course, basically. And because maybe some of you have worked with her in person, and that's wonderful. Her being in Wisconsin and me being in California, we could only do it by correspondence, by the US mail. So she would set me up, send it to me. I would do my part, send it back. She would approve or not approve, and then set me up for the next phase. So it would go back and forth like that. Well, it so happens that I was 3/4 of the way through the Okesa, and it got lost in the mail. And that was that felt pretty crummy, but at some point after initial jolt of that, I just resolved that, okay, then I have to start over again. I'll start over again. That's okay. And it takes more than, I just resolved that it's going to take more than that for me to to give up a sewing practice. So, but lo and behold, sewing bodhisattvas in the form of Karen and Carola Butler and Liz Lawler showed up and stitched. They gathered the same and similar material and stitched it up by hand up to the point that I had left it. And I'm feeling emotional just talking about it because that bodhisattva energy just hit me like a just unbelievably powerfully. So I'll always be grateful to them for getting me. I wouldn't be, so if anytime I wear this Okesa, I remember them. So so just, yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to Karen, Carola, and Liz for that. So yeah, another personal note, and I'll just open it up on the influence of women practitioners, and for me, in even choosing Zen, Soto Zen, as a practice. Somewhere in the late 90s, I was still kind of shopping around. I knew Buddhism felt good, and I was around Tibetan Buddhists, and I read on some Zen traditions and also some Theravada. So all of that was a great influence in the beginning, and it still is. But what sold me, and I can honestly say this, there are two things that sold me on Soto. One was reading coming across Dogen's Genjo koan, and with the famous verse in that of, to study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be illuminated by the myriad of dharmas. And it goes on for a couple more, but it was just that. So that was one big one. But the other one was a photograph, simple photograph. And this was obviously a Zen nun, I could tell, a Japanese monastic. And it very well could be at this Nisoto that I mentioned. I just came across this photograph of this woman monastic who was just working in the garden. I think she was tending a bonsai. I have the image in my mind, and I'll share that too, the actual image of her. And I don't know her name. I'd like to find out who she is, but this was about 25 years ago. So just working in the garden with this plant, I could sense this just palpable joy of things as they are and just taking care of things, just taking care. So it was only later that I heard this phrase called Dharma joy, but that joy was just very palpable and very present, even in a photograph to me. And I just said to myself, I like that too. So I was really impressed with that image and that feeling of Dharma joy. So I've talked enough. I'll leave it there. I'd love to hear any more. Love to hear some comments and hear some anything you'd like to add. Thank you.
Okay, at this point, we'll open it up to the group. Mokyo.
Thank you so much. So enjoyed this talk, and I'm going to need your email address. I need to be able to communicate with you. I don't know if you were there this morning, but we're doing a project on women ancestors. So, and I've checked a few off that you've mentioned in our list. So I'm definitely going to get that book, but I want you to know that I've heard of you by Karen. She told me the story of it getting lost in the mail and put the fear in me as I would be mailing out my rocket suit, my scraps sewn together. I'd be like, oh, please let it get there. And I was on pins and needles every time, waiting for it to come back. But she is a love. She's just a love. And so I so appreciate all this information, and somehow I need to get your email so that we can communicate further, and I'll let other people go. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mokyo. Yeah, I really want to know what you're doing and be in contact. Thank you.
Please.
Wonderful. Yes.
And I believe you mentioned you had some resources you wanted me to link. So don't forget to send those to me, and then I'll put those, make those available.
Will do. Thank you.
Sangak, were you raising your hand?
I was. Thank you. Thank you, Cosette. Kanzan, always good to see you and to hear you. I'm very interested in the Japanese Korean corridor relative to the kingdoms within Korea, getting in touch with the emperor in Japan. And my memory is that this fluctuated over time, and that during from say 700 to about 900 Common Era, there was a rise and fall of so many different emperors, shoguns, and warlords, both in China and in Japan and in Korea. Is it fair to say, from what you've been looking at, that as the politics turned, so did the recognition of women? That is, it seems as if the wave of patriarchal aspects of total domination by emperors or by warlords or by shoguns pushed down the opportunities of women. And when that was changed, it went up. So I just wondered if you came across any of that in either of the references you made.
Not as yet, but I think that's a fair assumption to make, because when empresses had more were more in charge, and empresses weren't just on the throne; they could be the spouse of the emperor, but they were still called. There were two different. There was another term for the empress who was on the throne and who was not. But nevertheless, they were political figures, and
Yes.
and probably even more influential than the emperor, as Empress Komyo proved to be.
Yes.
But yeah, I think because of the it's a complicated history, as we know, a long history, but the medieval times and the warring states and the warring provinces just really eroded imperial control, really. So this just became a martial nation. Yes, that's really all. But I think, yeah, I think either a history of Japan, any good history of Japan, we can kind of, connect the dots that way. Sure. In terms of equality and patriarchy.
Sure.
Thank you for that's another item for me to look into.
Anyone else? We are at, Senku.
Just under the wire, good, all right. Kanzan, really nice to hear your words. We've had a nice day of listening to the project that Boundless is working on around looking at our women's heritage and getting more in depth with understanding who these women were, who they are, and now with your comments relative to specifically Japan, and you really brought up a lot of really wonderful new, small things, which kind of gives us an idea of what the issues were and what was the obstacle that women had, and the very striking progress that was made by many of them. The lady that the Roshi that you were talking about, that the book Zen Seeds, did she have any male students as well? Did she have both male or female, or what do you know about that?
She has male lay students, but monastics, as far as Dharma heirs or monastics, they're all female.
Yeah. But anyway, I just want to say thank you so much for
Thank
your
you.
comments.
And I'm sorry I couldn't make the earlier talk. I wanted to, I'm juggling work and this retreat. So, but I will be watching that recording for sure. So,
Okay.
thank you, everybody.
I have developed an editing capacity here, so now I should hopefully be able to turn those around a bit more quickly.
Excellent.
All right, so Zenku, do you want to determine what you want to do for timing for this sitting period?
Yeah, I think we'll go pretty well straight ahead, and to 25 minutes, and we'll make sure we end on time.
Okay.
So we'll take just 2 or 3 minutes to stretch our legs and then come back for Zazen.
Thanks.